Heads up, we're going to just talk about the topic about current standard, and essentially we're going to talk about 5 cards that I'm going to be grateful that are rotating out of standard when Midnight Hut comes out, and 5 cards that I'm going to miss. Now, I'm going to have an honorable mention here, and the honorable mention is going to be a little bit weird if you don't hear it, but here's the honorable mention of a card that I am not going to miss when rotation happens, and that is it's both the honorable mention about cards that I'm going to miss, as well as cards I will not miss, but I'm leaving the honorable mentions to, well, Eldraine. Eldraine is getting the whole honorary mention list. And I know a lot of people are going to kind of be like, what? Because most people, when you've been hearing about Standard and the reason why Standard has been a bit of a hard format to play, or at least a frustrating format for some people, it's mostly that they point to this set. Mostly because it's a very powerful set. It was one of the more high powerful sets that came out in a while. Had a lot of banned cards, and I mean a lot of banned cards in multiple formats. I mean, Oko, enough said. We all seen the Oko shenanigans. But for those who have not spent Eldraine or just started Magic, Eldraine was a very, very high-powered set. It caused a lot of staples, and most of the cards that many people are not going to miss are the Eldraine staple cards. And what do I mean by a staple? A staple card is a card that usually it's really hard to change out of a deck design, even in multiple deck archetypes. And Eldraine just provided a ton for a lot of archetypes. Like, you're playing mono red aggro, you're going to play your Bone Crusher Giants, you're going to play your finisher Embercleaves. You're playing your 1-drop knight that Fervent Champion. Wow, I almost forgot the name there. But, that's an example. Let's say you're playing Mono Green Stompy, you play your Lovestruck Beast, you play your Great Hinges and such, and even Questing Beasts once in a while. Which is weird to think. I still remember when actually looking at Questing Beasts when it got revealed, and I kind of thought that was going to be the most busted card that it, was going to get banned or some shit like that. It's kind of funny to actually now look at that and being like, oh, the card's fair and balanced. Even with how much text it has, compared to all the other powerful cards that in Eldraine that did got banned and such. I kind of find a little bit of humor in that, I'm not gonna lie. And then, of course, there's just other archetypes. I could just keep going and going. But, yeah, even one of them did kind of made the list. Sort of. I'll explain it once we get to it. But yeah, the staple cards, not many people miss. But then also Eldraine is in the cards I will miss. And specifically what I mean by that, as much as Eldraine was a high-powered set and had some really, 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 really annoying staples, there was also a lot of jank in the set. And a lot of people kind of miss that when they just go through the other archetypes and just see all the powerful spells and such. There was actually a lot of cool quality jank in Eldraine and such. Like, many people will talk about the gingerbread cookie, there's stuff like Dance of the Mance. There was even some nice little janky, kind of like that, were just so close to being staples, but were just on the edge of it. Like Trail of Crumbs and the basic food package, which was actually really cool. There's also, granted, mostly it died due to Witch's Cauldron combo being dead, but that's another story entirely. Nevertheless, though, there was just a lot of quality, pet cards, as I would like to call it, that many people probably had from Eldraine, that they probably are going to miss when rotation happens. So yeah, Eldraine was the boogeyman of Standard. It was a thing that people are going to be happy that they've been playing the Standard 22 format. They're tired of being Brazen Borrowed. They're tired of being stomped with Bone Crusher Giant. But I will admit, there is a few cards from Eldraine that I am going to miss. Let's actually talk about one of them that I'm going to miss. And technically with number 5, since we're sticking with Eldraine just a little bit, I actually decided to put it to 2 cards because both of them are kind of the same and sort of not. I'll explain why in a minute. And number 5 on my list, the cards I'm going to miss, is Gilded Goose, and weirdly enough, the Royal Scions. Let me elaborate. Let's first start with Gilded Goose. Gilded Goose, this is probably one of my favorite cards from Eldraine in general. Yes, I know it kind of gets a bad rap thanks to the factor that it was an essential card in the Oko list, in the Simic Value Oko list that's been through all the year that it came out. Yes, that was obnoxious for a few months, but I just loved it because I remember a lot of people just looked at this card and just was like, but Birds of Paradise. And I'm like, but this is Birds in Paradise with an insurance policy. Like, being able to generate the food token, very nice. Yes, it's a lot slower than Birds of Paradise in a sense, I get that. But being able to generate the food tokens proved its value within standard meta in general. And honestly, I just love the combo of playing Gilded Goose on turn 1, playing Trail of Crumbs, and then just being able to tap the mana, sacrificing the food to activate the Trail of Crumbs. That is probably one of my favorite little combos that I did within that standard format. And the Royal Scions, mostly I put it on the list because it was in kind of like a Super Friends list that I was playing during the time when Eldraine came out. But honestly, I kind of liked this card the more I played throughout essentially its standard cycle. Yeah, it was very popular in the cycle list, but pretty much it was a very valuable draw engine in a lot of decks, especially a lot of more jankier mid-range decks. Very good, being able to make even your mid-range threats into at least aggressive-oriented creatures with its multiple +1s. Very, very nice. Being able to card draw, nice. And of course, if you can get to the ultimate on the Royal Scions, that just feels amazing. Being able to draw all those cards, deal as much damage to the amount of cards you draw or your hand size. No, it's your hand size. Brain fart on that one. But yeah, being able to do that, that was just amazing. I do like it, and I remember playing it a lot more than I'm playing the current Scions. Though I will say, keep an eye on Strixhaven Twins because, well, Flashback's coming back. There's a lot of spell-oriented synergies. There's a chance, is just what I'm going to be saying there. Now, we are sticking to Eldraine on number 5 as well as the cards that I will not miss. And the number 5 on that one is, well, you might notice that I did not mention a few of the other powerful archetypes within Eldraine. Specifically, the Mill archetype. And you can probably see where this is going. The cards that I am not going to miss from Eldraine was specifically 2 cards, which is Drown in the Loch and Into the Story. Now, for many people who had played through periods of Standard of last year and current year, you all know the Rogue's Mill deck. You know the Mill deck. Basic premise is they mill you a lot of cards and they use Drown in the Loch either as a removal spell or as a tempo counter spell. And then they can just use Into the Story to just restock their hand, get more counter magic and such, and be able to, didn't say please and such, and counter and mill until they mill your deck. And that was a primary victory condition for that deck, which is kind of mind-boggling. Mostly because we had other good threats within Eldraine. We had, the Loch Ness Monster that was supposed to be, the payoff card for playing the Mill archetype. But it turns out since to be able to take the full advantage of the card, you have to exile cards. And many people who played the Mill archetype don't want to do that so that their Drown in the Loch can essentially be a counterspell when it's needed, or remove any realms of threats. So it's kind of funny how within history that card kind of became less popular because of Drown in the Loch being such a good card. And it was annoying to go against, I'm not gonna lie. It was just kind of annoying to be having your cards first 2 to 3 cards milled due to a 1-drop mill spell, and then when that happens, it's oh, okay, I'm gonna try to respond to your 1-drop. Oh, nope, Drown in the Loch. Boop. And then just very powerful card. It brought my salt. I'm not gonna lie. It made me salty some games when I play against the Rogue Mill deck in general. But the reason why it's a little bit high on the list is because as much as the spell made me salty, I do have a weird semi-respect to the card. I have semi-respect to both Drown in the Loch and Into the Story because they just were kind of the quintessential cards that actually make, as well as other cards we're going to be talking about later down the list, they're kind of the thing that actually made Mill a possibility, ranging from being a very powerful deck. Because for those who don't know, who have not played Magic in a long while, there was a time where Mill was more like a jank deck. it was kind of like the janky brew. It was like the brew that you try to make just for the laughs on your F Friday Night Magic. You're probably not going to win with it, but if you did, that's cool. But most of the mill decks in the past were not really decks that were trying to win by mill per se. They were more trying to win by threats that were, like, for example, consuming aberration, stuff like that. Or even like, oh, the Jace's Illusion, that was a flyer that gets bigger once your library was that certain size. I'm having a brain fart on the name of the card. Who knows, maybe the editor can figure it out and such, or maybe I'll just figure it out on research. But anyway, basically, it was more just like control decks that just had late game threats that synergized with cards that you milled. It was basically the Catch-22 premise of those deck designs. But due to Throne of Eldraine providing us Drown in the Loch and Into the Story, it actually became a valuable archetype to actually be able to mill your opponent's deck, not only in Standard, but as well as in eternal formats like Modern and such. So, Drown in the Loch, you're a good spell. Into the Story, you're a good spell, but I'm going to appreciate you getting out of Standard. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's even to the point that actually Secret Lair is going to be coming out for the set that's actually Strixhaven alternate arts. And one of the cards in that list is going to be Drown in the Loch. And I'm just going to say right off the bat, I'm just probably going to sell that thing because I do not want to see that spell anymore. I have been countered and killed by that spell and had the restock from Into the Story one too many times. Okay, number 4 on the list is actually a card that is a Planeswalker. And it's probably one of my favorite Planeswalkers from this year of Standard, essentially, or at least from the Ikoria Standard, and that's specifically Vivian's Monsters Advocate. This card was such a good card. Like, just being... Now, was it as good as the Core 2020 Vivian and such? Probably not, but both those have their versatilities in their format of their times. Like the previous Vivian, it was just good because it could take out problematic flyers and enchantments. This Vivian mostly just helped you essentially keep your mid-range game plan to a good step, so to speak. It allowed you to create those tokens that have the versatility of the ability counters on it, so if you need to block against flyers, get Reach. If you need to go aggressive, get Trample. Though, let's be frank, a majority of the time, you're just putting Reach counters on those things, just having free Reachers, which helps you create blockers to keep Vivian pumped up and up. And you could even use it as a creature tutor spell, which actually was really nice for combo-centric deck designs. So being able to use the minus, cast a creature, and then get a second creature that maybe combos with the creature you initially cast. That was just a very, very, very cool synergy. I love that synergy. It's probably one of my favorite cards that they made in Ikoria, in my opinion. And I have it, like, in an assortment of my commander decks. Like, it's a very powerful card. And, yeah, I did, while playing Standard 2020, had to admit, when incorporating some deck designs, I was like, wow, I really miss Vivian's Monsters Advocate. So, yeah, Vivian's Monster Advocate, number 4 card. Now, the number 4 card I am not going to miss, which coincidentally was from Ikoria. You might be noticing a theme here. The number 4 card I'm not going to miss that I got dead by this card way too many times in Limited, and of course way too many times in Standard, Xena Flare. Xena Flare was such an obnoxious card. Like, it kind of got better once our Graveyard Hate got better within, like, stuff like Strixhaven, as well as a little bit of Kaldheim and such. And when people started incorporating the kind of like Graveyard Hate packages, but, oh boy, Xena Flare was a card. Xena Flare was just one of those cards that was just... It was an absurd card. Like, it was the cornerstone to make the cycling decks work because it was their best finisher, which was good for that deck archetype, don't get me wrong, but it was very, very annoying to essentially just play out your game plan, and then your opponent just essentially plays the little magistrate, pinch you, goes a little bit aggro, deals a little bit of burn damage, and then when you think you are just there, you just got past the aggro, you are keeping your grounds, Xena Flare for 12, badoo. Like, the amount of times that happened to me during my Standard brewing during that time was just Whew, it was way too many to count. I'm not gonna lie. There was just something kind of draining on, even like in other matches, like if you're playing aggro and you were playing against the matchup and you were just so close to getting to the finishing. You were so close to the last few points of damage. Boof, Xena Flare, they gain so much life, and then they give you like a significant life loss, and you're like, no. Like, Xena Flare just felt bad. Like, it felt like it was a great card, don't get me wrong. It was good that the cycling decks had that kind of like a comeback card, but boy, was it salty to go against. I am not gonna lie. So, number 3 as cards that I'm going to miss. This one we're actually going to go to Ferris Beyond Death for this one, and the card that I am going to miss most is actually a card that was part of the Graveyard Hate package to help against the Xena Flare shenanigans, Clophis. Clophis was such a good card. Like, Clophis is a very well-designed god card from the set. It was just nice to have the Graveyard Hate synergy from it, and then being able to, essentially, depending on which card you hate from it, get life gain, or just essentially get mana. Very nice for just semi-ramping, but it's also just a nice free drop. It's like a, essentially, Rest in Peace that is more, like, granted, it's not as powerful as Rest in Peace, but you get, like, a trade-off. You get, like, temporary Graveyard Hate by just hanging out specific cards, and getting the synergies of hanging out those cards that later down the line, if you get the proper devotion, you get a pretty good mid-range threat. So, yeah. Clophis, this one was pretty easy. Cycling decks was really obnoxious. Clophis was always a nice option to have against graveyard-centric deck designs, especially those that incorporate the escape package that came from Ferris Beyond Death. So, yeah. I am going to miss playing this card. This card was a really fun to play with. Now, a card I am not going to miss, and we're going to go back to Courier for this one. And this one I'm going to cheat because I think we all know which one I'm more referring to, but, the ultimatums. Oh my, the ultimatums were obnoxious to play against. Like, they were very high power spells. Now, the two specifically, let's talk about the ones I'm talking about specifically. Like, majority of them were jank, don't get me wrong. But the two that did made the staple for the formats were specifically Emergent as well as Genesis Ultimatum. Boy, going against those cards was so obnoxious. Like, Emergent Ultimatum, there was a time where that was kind of a jank card as well until people started until Kaldheim came out and we had the extra turn spell. And the little trick you can do with Volky as well as Tibble, where you can get Volky, but you can cast up the Tibble side. As well as with Vorinclads, it made that card went from being kind of like a jokey archetype to actually a very competitive archetype. And I'm gonna say it, just for the fact that it's been since Kaldheim when this archetype actually became popular, I'm sick of going against it. There's just something about not being able to, just essentially trying to finish out the game, and then they can come back with Emergent Ultimatum, and then just the tempo as well as the board state advantage that they can generate from that. Ridiculously absurd. Like, I guess I'll also keep a little bit of the Ferris Beyond Death theme with this one, because Emergent Ultimatum fetching essentially Kiora Best to See You God, probably one of the more salt-inducing plays of going against that deck in general. Like, and Emergent Ultimatum had its fair share of annoyances, especially during the Omnath days when Omnath was legal, but also just pretty much it was just a very powerful card that brought out a lot of Planeswalker threats, and one specific one that we're going to be talking about once we get later down the list, very obnoxious card to go against. Boy, was I grateful that Kaldheim brought us Disdainful Stroke, because it helped us at least keep these cards within balance. Okay. Now to number 2 of a card that I'm going to miss. I'll be honest with you, this one is more of a jank card, but I am going to miss, of all things, the Alpine Watchdog. The Alpine Watchdog was just... Now, in general, I could probably just cheat in this and say all the dog cards within the core set 2020, essentially. I just love the dog package. What can I say? I'm a dog person. I have a dog right over here. I have 3 dogs. It was nice to have the Jinky do the dog cat brew and such with Rin and Siri and such. And the Alpine Watchdog was just a generally just good 2-drop. Like, yeah, it was just a slight bear with upside, but having it synergize with the other Watchdog-based packages within that set. It was just fun to brew around it. Plus, he's a good boy. He's such a good boy. Then, the number 2 card I'm not going to miss that also came from the core set. Thieves Guild Enforcer. Oh boy, Thieves Guild Enforcer. If Drown in the Lock was the interaction spell that helped Mill get to the ground, it was Thieves Guild Enforcer along with Ruin Cloud that just essentially made the Mill archetype a very, very, very annoying archetype to go against. Like, an opponent being able to flash in Thieves Guild Enforcer and then play a 2-drop Rogue and then just mill your cards and then turn free, hold up a Drown in the Lock. That play, I've seen that play way too many times. I even seen them play it just being able to play so many of the cheap rogues, mill your deck. Thieves Guild Enforcer, and also the fact that it had flash, so it can be used as a good like protector if you go aggro. You can flash in the Thieves Guild Enforcer and block. Such a good card, but boy, going against that card was really, really salt-inducing. Like, just the fact that it also synergized with multiple rogues entering in the battlefield and had multiple Thieves Guild Enforcers. Boy, going against that archetype was absurd. Like, Thieves Guild Enforcer, I am grateful I don't have to deal with that card anymore, but, oh boy, that was an annoying card. Okay, and now we get to number 1. And this one is going to be a weird one to mention, because the number 1 card that I am going to miss that is a Planeswalker, weirdly enough, is Teferi. Teferi, Master of Time. Now, this one I'm going to have to explain a little bit of the story behind this one. When we heard about the core set that was coming out, and it was going to be Teferi themed, essentially, everybody was kind of a little bit concerned. Mostly because we were going off from War of the Spark essentially rotating out, and the Teferi from War of the Spark... Okay, for those who are new to Magic and don't know, this is the Teferi from War of the Spark that I'm mentioning about. Teferi Time Raveler. It has been one of the most infamous cards of that format. It was very obnoxious. People were just... They were sick of that card. And it didn't help that in Dominaria, there was also Teferi Hero Dominaria, very powerful card. We mostly just known when we seen Teferi, we know that it was a very powerful meta card that might be a little tad obnoxious. It got that reputation, to put it in the most bluntest of terms. So when we heard that a core set was going to theme itself around the story of Teferi, we were like, oh, great. But then once we saw the Teferi, and seeing it in play, and having decks where I played the Teferi card, I'm just gonna be legit honest, this is probably one of the most fairest Teferis that I've seen in a while. Bar Commander, of course, I know how it's absurd in Commander. I know. But yeah, at least in Standard, Teferi was actually a relatively fair and balanced card. It brought back phasing, which was kind of cool. And it just helped with a lot of archetypes. It helped with the control archetypes. It helped with the reanimator archetypes, with the factor that you draw on this card. And of course, if you get to the ultimate, that's actually really cool. It even had a really cool animation. So, Teferi, cool card. It is kind of nice that we got this Teferi, and it is going to be sad to actually see this Planeswalker go. But hey, it was a fair Teferi. It was fun to play. It wasn't really busted, which is something you really like to see from a Planeswalker card in general. Unlike the number 1 card that I am not going to miss when it rotates out, you can probably see where this is going. Now, Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, is my number 1 card I am not going to miss when it rotates out. Okay, let's just get some things out of the straight. Am I grateful that they reprinted Ugin? Yes. Because here's the thing. Before this reprint, essentially, of Ugin the Spirit Dragon the Spirit Dragon is a highly powerful commander card, as many people will tell you. The problem is, though, it was really hard to get it for your commander decks because the price of it was ridiculously absurd. Like, there were times where Ugin was in the 60s or above. It was a very, very hard staple card to get. However, thanks to this new core set, or to the core set at that time, along with the kind of like collector booster shenanigans, so you can get different printings of Ugin, either the full art as well as the regular printing, it made getting Ugin while still pricey, a lot more budget affordable compared to its previous prices. So, for that case, I am grateful that Ugin was reprinted for the sake of having the nice reprint for people who needed it for their deck designs in Commander. However, in Standard, especially in Best of 1 Standard, going against this card was a pain in the butt. Like, here's the thing. When I saw Ugin as well as Azusa got spoiled with this core set, I was like, wait, ramp is really good. And you're giving us probably one of the best in-game ramp targets ever. And I'm like, is this a good idea? I remember looking at it and being like, oh, great. And of course, as many people know, boy, was Ugin a very popular card in Standard. Like, whether you're ramping it out with Genesis Ultimatum, or just essentially getting it from just natural ramping in general. And it didn't help that even Counterheim was able to provide good ramp with Binding the Old Gods. Like, we had a lot of good ramp. We had Cultivate even in the Standard and such. So, yeah. It wasn't really hard to get to Ugin by turn 6, turn 5 sometimes. And, yeah, if you were playing a mid-range deck, and your opponent plays Ugin, you pretty much, unless you have a hasty threat, you pretty much lost the game. And oh my, it was such salt-inducing when that happened. Now, to be fair, you could make the argument that once people started to incorporate Soul Shatter within their deck designs, Ugin became less problematic. But it was definitely one of the more salt-inducing cards, and there's still even some people that are still salty about the card this day. Especially when they're playing against it in Historic Brawl, which, I'm just gonna say it, Ugin in a best of 1 format, as currently with Arena's iteration, feels a little bit unfair. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it feels really unfair. Like, in Commander, like 4-player, multiplayer Commander, Ugin feels like a more fair card, because, hey, you play it for the board weight, and if one of your opponents can respond to the Ugin, you're fine. But in a best of 1 situation, if you don't have a response to the Ugin and they just get the tempo play of being able to bolt whatever they want to bolt each turn or do the semi-board wipe again, it's just really, really hard to come back unless you have direct targeted removal. Which I will give WotC the benefit of the doubt. They have been incorporating a lot more Planeswalker-centric removal or either cards that deal direct damage to Planeswalkers. So, to be fair, Ugin was kept in check, but boy, when you're not ready and you win against Ugin, it was such a card. And yeah, it's still going to be annoying to play against this in Historic Brawl, I'm not going to lie, but at least I don't have to deal with it in Standard anymore. And that's this episode of Top Deck Bots. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I hope you all have a lovely day. As they say, hip hip hooray.